Sunday, August 3, 2025. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minute news. Our guest today is a political strategist and human rights activist with a background supporting senior diplomatic staff seeking peace in the Middle East. Ashish Prashar, welcome to the Weekend Show.
Thank you.
The world seems to be more volatile than I've ever known it, certainly in my lifetime. Obviously, we're seeing conflict in the Middle East, certainly in Gaza. We know about Ukraine, Yemen. I mean, you know, it's not peacetime by any sense. But then again, we also see a kind of firestorm in the US through a kind of trade agreements or kind of trade kind of fighting, I guess. It's almost like a kind of Cold War through trade, where Donald Trump is actually leveraging relationships based upon these tariffs. And the announcement that came on Thursday, late on Thursday, was probably kind of one of his weirdest moments, where again he set the world on fire by throwing out random percentage tariffs on the strangest of countries, 41% on Syria, for example. Nobody really understands his thinking. Obviously, he's not of sound mind. He is very much compromised mentally, and the world is having to deal with that. So let's just look, you know, based on your experience, you know, you're based in the US, but you travel around the world. What do you think countries like European Union member states, and certainly Ursula von der Leyen after her meeting with him in Scotland, what do you think they're actually thinking about the United States right now?
Thinking of what a world looks like without the United States as their main partner. I mean, that's really where we're at. I mean, I want to take everyone back a bit. When he announced the first set of tariffs, we did the broad 15% across Europe.
Liberation Day.
Liberation Day. I have, in my career, never seen so many European prime ministers that week fly to China. That should be a telltale sign to everybody about what they're thinking. Yes, they're not abandoning America, but they're thinking of the volatility being unpredictable for their economies, for people in their countries who have to deal with their own inflation, their goods and services, and them all being impacted. And they're trying to think of a way to protect themselves. In that week, something massive happened. It's not just build better relationships between Italy and Spain with the Chinese. The Germans let Chinese EVs into Europe, which start next year. Something that they've said would never happen. That is with China being the biggest maker of EVs, which is a huge threat to the United States, but also, frankly, European car production in the future. And they were willing to go there because of the volatility that the Trump administration is putting out into the world. They would sacrifice some of the things that they called red lines economically to make sure they had a solid trade partner. This was also going to it's going to reinforce this multipolar world. By the way, something that Secretary Rubio has talked about. We're not going to be the people aren't going to be dependent on us. And we are moving into this multipolar world where there's going to be different groups of regions of leadership, different regions of economic growth. And frankly, we care about what we care about for us. And they have not hidden any of this. And what it's had an effect on our allies specifically is like their dependence and their reliability with the US has been like you pulled beneath them like nothing they've seen before. And they've had to now go and build relations with countries that they thought they would never have to, let in goods and services they never thought they would allow. The UK recently just did a huge trade deal with India, which lets in lots of new Indian goods that they, again, would not have necessarily allowed in the past or even done at the pricing they did because they cannot rely on the American economy to be its partner successfully for the next decade, for 4 or 5 years, however long this presidency is, but also just those economic things will last decades as they take flight today. Now, the other thing that he's done is, to your point about erratic, it is going to cause repercussions that I don't think they're even aware of. Like, think about it, right? So while we're all having these negotiations, people are planning for tariffs to potentially be there. America and Europe don't necessarily make as much as they used to, right? I always talk about this thing with what happened when Israel and Iran were going at it. People said to me, oh, Iran threatening the Straits of Hormuz. Well, we produce all our own oil in America. It doesn't affect us. Right. But the people who get the oil from the Gulf make everything for America. So the economic collapse that is going to be all over the world if the straits are closed is huge. Hence why everyone wanted it to be over as soon as possible. From the Gulf to the US to Europe, they wanted it to end because the repercussions are huge. That's the same thing the tariffs are doing. There are people everywhere who make things for us, who assemble things for us, and all the prices are so unpredictable and out of control that it's only going to affect the American end user in the end and our diplomatic relations with Europe.
So let's talk about the naivete of the America First concept, because, you know, I think this is something that is pretty much unique to Trump, and he's really pushed for this. And this is a kind of far-right nationalist attitude that America, you know, it's American exceptionalism, isn't it? That, you know, we can do anything and we can look after our own and we can produce everything here and we don't need the rest of the world. And that was fine maybe in like 1955, but in 2025, you know, globalization is a real thing. Like, it actually exists. You can't deny its existence. And built into that, or baked into that, is this reliance on China for parts, even for US manufactured aircraft, for example. You know, you build a 787, half the parts are coming from China anyway. So the US is kind of stuck in that way, and it doesn't have the ability to manufacture as quickly and, you know, on the scale that China does.
Yeah. I mean,
the problem, though, as I see it, was COVID. You know, you throw COVID into the mix of this narrative, blaming the Chinese, or Trump blaming the Chinese for the lab leak and the China virus and all of this stuff, just kind of doubled down on why China is the enemy, rather than China actually being part of the manufacturing base of America.
I mean, you only have to come closer to home where Ford is making its parts. Mexico, right. And to make one engine, they send parts to Canada. They get the steel from Mexico. They do it, they assemble it in Canada, bring it to Pennsylvania before it gets to Detroit. Literally globalization at our borders, right? And those two countries would be affected by tariffs as well under Trump's like announcements and the volatility of them, right? They needed to make an enemy. COVID, the problem with like, they couldn't make the virus an enemy. They refused to like say that this is a threat to humanity. Instead of doing that, they focused on a country, a bad guy, to say that they caused all the problems because they needed a human being to be the bad guy. Yes. And that's created, like, I think, hate that stretches beyond just the right, like unnecessarily, because people can be easily propagandized. We have to forget that, like, under the stresses of a global virus, people who I wouldn't expect have been saying things about who casually drop in China virus and things like that. And it brought out racism, I think, in the US and other,
well, certainly European Asian nations. Hate crime.
Yes,
went
Asian
up
hate crimes were insane. They weren't just made by, they weren't done by like, you know, rednecks down south. They were happening in New York, California, by people who are liberal voters. I mean, let's just be honest. We've got to be transparent about how easily we are drawn into that narrative. And it's now made China the big bad enemy. But I would also say to like people, like, we've designed our economy to be reliant on the rest of the world, to be in partnership with the rest of the world. So we could also, frankly, control the rest of the world and work with the rest of the world. And also the other thing that people have forgotten with all this is that China was led into, you know, the global economy by us and everything. I know it's inevitable, obviously. And our businesses have over 20, 30 years deliberately outsourced those things there. By the way, China now outsources to other Asian markets. They are making their own companies, own businesses, own economy. So these tariffs, weirdly, they played ball. Like, you know, I think Trump tried to bluff China. I think he thought they would capitulate immediately, giving Americans in America a better deal, whatever he believes in his head. But actually, I think Xi Jinping just pulled the rug under him and said, okay, cool, let's see what happens. Like, you're good.
But we're hearing this from lots of these trading partners, yes, including Canada and the European Union. They're like, well, actually, we don't really need the United States.
No, 100%. And look, while the US is the biggest market for some of our neighbors, they will diversify and export to other places as well. They're not reliant on the US the way they were. We are more reliant on the global economy. Look, it's not to say that the US could not manufacture anything, everything, and build its own thing. It is a continent. It is a continent bigger than Europe. You know, if we wanted to maybe do this socialist experiment Trump's trying to do, maybe we could. But we have not done anything to incentivize that growth or that production or that environment in our own economy to mitigate the damage the tariffs are going to do to our economy from all the stuff that we rely on abroad. We've not done that. Anyone who wants to do that project successfully needs to also be doing domestic stuff to amplify and, and build businesses and industry that could actually supplement that loss. But we're not doing that.
Trump is lying about the investment that is coming to the US. So he, makes this announcement about with the EU, for example, he says we've agreed this 15% tariff, for example, which is a lie because, of course, they then have to take it to the member states to vote on that. But he also threw out numbers, 600 billion investment and all this stuff. None of that is true. But it's almost as if world leaders know now how to play Trump. Give him a win. Let him announce something. Because Trump is just playing to the American cameras. He doesn't care about anybody else. He's playing to his base. He's playing to the American people and lying about the level of investment. And if you look at, I think on the White House website, there's like a list of successes that Trump has put, and, not to mention the promotional videos that he's made of himself. And you could literally go down the list of these investments supposedly, and you can debunk them. So this is the reality. So what's the effect of this going to be if there isn't the investment that he's claiming? If these trade deals are actually going to be paid for by American consumers and importers rather than these countries and exporters. And, inflation is on the rise. The jobs numbers announcement recently was not great. The country's trajectory on the economy is going to be disappointing. And Trump can only blame Joe Biden for so long.
Right. So on the job number thing, I think it's really fascinating that we're bringing that up because also there is a, I don't think we've recovered from COVID, which is the end of Trump's term, because even the Biden numbers, and it's not necessarily like, hey, Democrats, Republicans, this is just like how we've been counting jobs, which is also problematic.
Well, in most countries, it's weird, isn't it? The way
right?
that
We have
jobs
single
are counted,
moms working 4 jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, the job numbers look great, but should that happen? Should that happen at all under Biden, Trump, whoever? Should that be the economic indicator that we have a full economy? We don't, actually. There's lots of people unemployed. The reality is we have people with multiple jobs. The department that does this is like, great, we can say that it's growing, but we have people literally only being able to put food on the table and pay their medical bills because they work 3 jobs. That is insane. That's an institutional problem, whether it's Democrat or Republican. And we've just got to be honest about that as a public. That has to be addressed. Right. So he can continue to blame Biden all he wants. The reality is I think the most of the public are aware of this at this point. I think the public, even his base, there's definitely been a shock at like these tariffs and actually having an effect on their day-to-day lives, food production and all that stuff that we talked about. Like it's not just like toys from China. And also if we're talking about toys, I think he even had to address the fact that toys at Christmas will be more expensive for the first time. The fact that he actually felt that was an addressable point shows that people on his side of the aisle are making noise about their day-to-day basket of goods.
Well, the logic was very weird.
Yeah.
He said you can only have 3 dolls, for example.
And
it was like it's such a strange example.
But it also shows you, because he is connected to his business, he does listen to the tweets, the posts, whatever. He's hearing that feedback. So he felt like he had to address it, which means it's not isolated to like, hey, they just think this is all him being good. I think this is also him taking the extreme of what I think American diplomacy has been going down a path of since post 9/11, right? We have been a bit more of a bully about what we want, whether it be trade deals, military interventions and everything in general. We have actually been, and the UK has been its partner, frankly, in some of those issues. But, we've said if we don't like something, we're just going to go do it, whether it be militarily or economic. And some of that's been extraction, of resources, frankly, in some of the countries. It didn't, think about this in context. We all know now Iraq was bullshit. Like we all know a lot of oil has come out to Europe and America. We've all benefited. It's extraction, right? So we benefit from that, right? So that's evil, but he's taken it to every form of the diplomacy field. Like we're just going to mess up every trade situation that we've built.
Yeah.
And cause chaos. And he's using the same bullying techniques that we use maybe militarily in an environment that you can't use that in, because there are other ways that people can build relationships with other parts of the world. By the way, other parts of the world that the Western hegemony didn't originally want to build productive relationships with are now they're going to be the key partners as they go forward and grow. It only made BRICS, which I think was a loose establishment. I think even a couple of years ago was like, are they aligned? Because, Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa, they all have really different governments and ideological beliefs. So to hold that coalition together against the Western hegemony was harder. But I think they've stabilized that coalition and made it a big block of countries that can create an economic alternative. The other thing that's been happening, and it happened towards the end of the Biden term, I think some people realizing that Trump might be president, people have decoupled from the dollar. Like Singapore,
Yes.
one of the most thriving
Yes.
countries in the world, undoubtedly a world leader in economic stuff and banking and financial services, decoupled from the dollar. Saudi Arabia has decoupled from the petrodollar. People have been doing all these things that don't make headlines, that are dangerous to American economic dominance of the world. And they're just betting, even if they're not going all away from the US, they're hedging their bets, which is a threat to, the US and its economic superiority.
And this goes back to the naivety of the America First attitude, is that if you don't understand how the world economies are intrinsically linked, you're going to find yourself a whole lot poorer. And obviously there's a delay because economies can take 2 to 5 years to kind of turn. They are invariably slow. But Americans, I think a survey this week, 6 out of 10 Americans place blame on the Trump administration for driving up their cost of living. This poll was conducted by Morning Consult for the Century Foundation. They asked 2,007 Americans how they're managing the high cost of living and who do they think to blame and what are the solutions. 63% said Trump had a negative impact on grocery prices. 61% said he had a negative impact on the cost of living. And nearly half said that he had a negative impact on their finances. And, I mean, the American elections tend to be won or lost based on the economy. And Trump was a very good marketing man for his own business skills. But, people are starting to realize that he only played a businessman on TV, that he was given the trappings of that success by the TV networks. It wasn't really his boardroom. He wasn't really firing people. And I mean, it's a uniquely American, well, I'll say it's a uniquely American story, but look at who's running Ukraine right now. He also came out of the TV too. But what's unique here though is that Trump is a fraud. That he really is not a great success, and we can see now that he is not a deal maker. Until he made this announcement late on Thursday, he hadn't actually done really any deals.
No.
I mean, half of one with the EU and a concept of a plan with the UK. This is all just performative, isn't it?
Yeah, and I go back to bullying as well, right? It's like they think at some point they will break those economies because also people in those economies also believe that they could be vulnerable too, right? It's not just the governments of those countries who have to hold their public together saying, hey, this is not going to affect us. But, word gets that it might impact them, right? I think they're using the tariffs look, let's just be honest. They're using the Brazil one to get Bolsonaro out of prison. Like, they literally sanctioned the judge that is having this wannabe autocrat locked up, and they put tariffs on the country because they won't pardon him. So it's bullying.
And they put 50% on Brazil.
Yeah.
And just so people know the history, Bolsonaro basically copied Trump's insurrection.
100%.
Was inspired by Trump's
100%.
insurrection. Did the same thing. The only difference was he actually got caught and held to account.
The Brazilian, unlike the US, which, there's lots of reasons why I personally can get into that, but like the Brazilians took action straight away. The evidence is there, public insurrection with video and live TV. I mean, they don't need much more evidence. They knew who triggered it. They knew who was also party to it in terms of the military and everything else. And they acted on it within weeks. They didn't wait 2-3 years. I personally think like part of the inaction on Trump's potential prosecution was I actually believe, and I do blame a little bit the Biden administration on this, because I think they thought, well, he'll just go away. It's the water. I think the one thing about American politics is the water under the bridge thing. It's gone. Yeah. He's not coming back. We beat him. We're going to beat him again if he runs again, and the only reason, and I think that after the first win against him, which was huge, in the COVID times, which wasn't, I think people need to remember, this wasn't the Biden win. It was a coalition win. You know, you think about all the black activists that mobilized in the South during BLM who got people to vote for someone they might not necessarily vote for. You think about all the people who voted for COVID thinking this guy's mishandled us, is trying to kill us. You know, they mobilized entire communities, the indigenous population. And we forget that mobilization in 2020 to get Trump out of office with maybe not their perfect candidate. Now, I think there was an arrogance of the Democrat Party, frankly, to think that, oh, he's gone. And we do this quite a lot in American politics. And I think one of Barack Obama's biggest crimes was never holding people accountable for Iraq. You get things like we're seeing across the pond right now in the Middle East and everything because we didn't hold people account for other war crimes and other historic. I mean, we all now know Bush lied. Like it wasn't, and we knew when Obama was elected. And, you know, there was no accountability for those individuals. And I think there was a little bit of that behavior with Trump, right? Publicly, everyone thinks he's responsible for this. So do we really need to prosecute him? When it got to a point where we knew he would rerun, you saw the screws turn on actually pushing for a prosecution. I'm not saying Biden instigated that. I'm just saying that, like, they took too long. Brazil is an example of, like, if you know someone's committed an insurrection, you have the evidence, it's all live. Why didn't you do it within weeks? There is no reason not to.
But that's the thing that fascinates me most about US politics, is that even when the evidence is on video, people will still say, well, it was just tourists being shown around the Capitol. And, you know, I cannot get my head around the fact that people will deny what we see with our own eyes. And because the counter narrative is so strong. And I think that really is the secret of Trump's success, is that we're living in a post-truth environment. The truth is irrelevant. And this now has become, I mean, so it's similar with the Jeffrey Epstein thing. I mean, you know, all the evidence from the, you know, the audio recordings of Trump to the images of Trump to the evidence that's been given by people, it's all there. And yet people aren't prepared to put those component parts together and come up with a common sense narrative.
Well, I say with the insurrection, I would say it's slightly different. I think we just took too long. We let the narrative get out. I think there was massive public abandonment of Trump, including from people maybe center. I don't even know what you want to call them, but like,
well, even Mitch McConnell blamed him, didn't he, the next day?
Yeah. That's why I go back to, if they acted like Brazil and within weeks of Biden taking office, took action to hold account everybody from the person who killed the cop to the former president, I don't think you get this post-truth world. We have this ability to allow it to happen because the longer the distance from the event to, you know, the re-election of Donald Trump, you had an environment in the middle where he could turn the story. And by the way, that took a couple of years. That wasn't immediate. People want to pretend that immediately happened. There was a lot of people who were abandoning ship, who were on the Republican Party, core people in the Republican Party. They took a year or so before they started telling different truths to what happened that day.
But they did impeach him. And I guess, you know, in the system that the US operates under, impeachment is pretty serious. The fact that it wasn't ratified in the Senate obviously is frustrating. But I guess that's when Trump was working the phones. And isn't this why we're in this situation right now, is all this stuff with tariffs? Because, of course, tariffs are supposed to go through Congress, and Trump is ignoring Congress because he feels like he is Congress. He said out loud, I am the law. So the fact that Republicans who have the controlling stake in Congress have abandoned their responsibilities to hold the executive to account, that says a lot about the cult-like nature of the MAGA Republican movement, doesn't it? And that it is far more fascistic than they even realize.
Right. So I don't think former presidents have done this, but we have had this cult of personality in the United States that goes back way beyond Donald Trump. I mean, Ronald Reagan was a cult of personality. Bill Clinton, to a degree, was cult of personality. People always show images of him being cool and like when he started. And undeniably, Barack Obama is a cult of personality. I think it's ingrained in our politics. And we do see them as the executive. I think some people don't believe that they can't do more sometimes. Like they're always demanding the president does this, but they don't forget the states and federal government operate differently. Donald Trump's the first to take that and go with it completely. Like he's like, okay, well, they think I can do everything. is Congress going to stop me? It's almost a dare. And even when there was Democrat control of Congress or the House under his first term, he, again, just didn't listen, didn't care. And it was always a dare. Are you actually going to try to stop me? And this time he has both houses, and he knows his road, he has a clear road to at least the midterms to get away with anything. Now he knows if they flip anything, unless they get both houses, the Democrats, which is possible, but unless they get both houses, again, he'll have a couple more years where he can tone it down a bit, but he'll still be able to get away with stuff because one house will compete with the other. But in essence, I think congressional politics has abdicated responsibility for a long time. I think it goes way back to Bush. I think when we started to sign into law with a round of applause, acts that restricted our rights and stripped our humanity in the United States under the post 9/11 world, we basically also stripped Congress's power in that time. People applauded the Patriot Act, but it's the reason ICE can do what it can do today. It's literally the reason. People applaud Barack Obama, but he got rid of posse comitatus, which basically means we can deploy the military on our own people. Presidents have done these things, not as egregiously as Donald Trump, but we've been slowly going to this direction of autocracy, or at least like singular control by an executive. Since the turn of the century, we just didn't have anyone who wanted to just rip it all out and just do it in one go.
Right. But guardrails have fallen,
yes,
and checks and balances have collapsed. And I guess, I had to learn these words about the US, guardrails, checks and balances, kind of weird words, but actually they are what cause or help the protection of American citizens and the system with which the US operates.
Yeah.
The problem is that the Supreme Court at the very top has been radicalized over time, clearly, but now a 6-3 majority of radicalized far-right Christian nationalists, effectively, who ratify anything that Donald Trump wants, including giving him the unprecedented support that is this immunity clause. Mm-hmm. Remarkable, really. So there's that. And that's why Trump wants everything to end up in the Supreme Court, because he knows they've got his back. Mm-hmm. That's what's so dangerous in terms of the lawlessness of America. I mean, suspending habeas corpus is one thing, but the fact that anything that gets as far as the Supreme Court is going to land in Donald Trump's camp is probably, as I see it, the biggest problem, because there's no one above them. There's no king and there's no line manager.
Right. And also you have to consider that this is why they're doing these arrests. Like you talked about the Palestinian activists like Mahmoud Khalil, who've been arrested in the last few months for his advocacy for Palestine at Columbia and other places. They have a court that can rule in their favor, and they're testing the bounds of what they can do, right? So they are, but here's the thing, right? They're not just testing the system, they're testing our resistance, right? This is the key. The reason they picked up not a Latino, not a black person who might be from Jamaica, and put him in prison, is they arrested Mahmoud Khalil because they believed that there was enough hate for Palestinians from the left and the right, because of what happened to Biden and the election and everything else, that no one would care about him. So if he got to his court date and then they get to strip his green card under the guise of national security, there'd be no resistance to these law-breaking acts. And they wanted it to go through the court system so they could get the eventual ruling to just strip anyone's green card for national security.
To set a precedent, right, for
and
for
that's
this
why
going
it's dangerous
forward.
not to look, we all have our political differences. We can all not support the same things, but you have to understand that was a threat to all of us. That was a threat to anyone holding a green card, because the green card, while not a visa, is like, you're almost American, right? It gives you a set of rights that most visas don't. And it was seen as like the ticket to being a citizen, and it's the path to be naturalized. It's a beautiful thing about the American story, but they went for him because they realized the resistance they might receive for maybe a Latino person, if they picked them up, would be far greater across the aisle than someone who's Palestinian, who they have done the fake charges of anti-Semitism and all the other stuff around, so they could push different communities against him. And that's why it's really important to understand what the case is and what the action is, rather than your political ideology about what you believe in the individual, because the precedent is set is huge. Now, their next target is, as you know, naturalized citizens. They're not joking. They are telling you what they're going to do. And you know where they got this idea from? The United Kingdom. And this is one of the most important things that people don't know. We don't have in Europe a lot of the, guaranteed you're born there, you're a citizen. Every country in Europe is slightly different on this stuff. The naturalization process is different. And while it is protected under the Constitution, in the last decade, the Brits removed citizenship and literally made someone stateless because she was a bride to an ISIS fighter. She was also trafficked, by the way. People need to know, Shamaya Begum, people look the case up. She was trafficked to be an ISIS bride and went back to the UK. And instead of the UK, if you believe she's a terrorist, instead of them putting her in court and locking her up for what you believe is true, they knew they didn't have a case. So they stripped her citizenship under the guise of national security. And now she's in a refugee camp in Turkey. She's stateless because they didn't actually have a case that she was an ISIS bride.
But this is going to happen more and more, isn't it?
And yes, so some of those groups that have been supporting the Republican Party in the build up to Trump being president saw that case, inspired by that case, and they're using national security as a guise to remove green cards. And they know eventually it'll be challenged in court, but they have the court they want to rule in the favor they want to rule, and they want to do the same to naturalized citizens. They want to denaturalize people, and they want the Mahmoud Khalil precedent is the reason we must resist it and move as a collective, whether you agree with his politics or not. And frankly, he only cares about ending this genocide. But if you agree with his politics or not, it's important because it sets precedent for all Americans and all immigrants who want to be Americans. It sets precedent because the next thing after the green card is the naturalized citizenship test. And they have the court they want. And they want to test the national security element against. They'll find someone who is the perfect victim that we might all feel a bit weird about. But remember why they're doing it and not the individual they're attacking.
They lied about Mahmoud Khalil's intentions. And this is what they do. They said he was a supporter of Hamas. So, anybody who is not supporting Israel clearly in their eyes is a supporter of Hamas, which is entirely untrue. But it also speaks mainly to this First Amendment right that all Americans are protected by, including visa holders, green card holders. If you are on the soil of the United States, you have your right to free speech. You can criticize the government, but Trump has tried to change that by writing executive orders to say that you can't be critical of this or of that. And this also speaks to what's happening with the universities, claiming that there is some kind of anti-Semitism going on just because people are standing up for the rights of the Palestinians to exist. Why do you think and we're hearing more and more, Columbia University settled a few days ago. I mean, why are we hearing these universities backing down so quickly, capitulating? Why is that happening in your view?
Because they have no support and resistance. I think the universities they're less education institutions as much as they are businesses at this point. Their boards and their donors are aligned maybe with the president about what they want and not want on the campus. And also, Palestine aside, I think there's a lot of these people who have nefarious views about Black education and other things, and they can use this as a way to curtail what is taught at university to a lot of people, right? And they have a president maybe willing to do that right now. And because the nature of the universities are business driven and so economic, they're not willing to lose the grants, they're not willing to lose the donors, and they're getting pressure from every side. Now, it does not mean that the presidents of these universities could not resist. They chose not to. We have weak people in leadership across a lot of institutions, from our mainstream media who are settling with him to our universities. I'm like, where is anyone's backbone to resist this president? But also, by the way, they're not getting any support truly from the left. They're not the Democrats. They're not getting any support from anyone. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer are not backing them. Where is their support? Where is their political support, political will to actually back them as institutions that provide education and are places where people can practice free speech and debate things that are uncomfortable. That's all that really matters. People on campuses are not pulling out guns and taking it to each other. They are debating uncomfortable truths about the world. And that is protected. It should be protected at our educational institutions, but we have no support. Now, while the public it could resist and support them. The public is dealing with ICE raids and police brutality and basically lawlessness that has been allowed to happen because we have this boomerang effect right now. We've realized again about what we're willing to accept. And this goes back multiple presidencies. The more we're willing to accept brutality, even the way we project it abroad, the more it will come back home. The more they're willing to, the more we let people get away with these actions abroad that we do, our militaries, the UK, France, Britain, the US, the more they will do it to us because they see no resistance on that elm. They're not going to get any resistance at home. So those protesters in California who pushed back, we should be supporting them. We should be supporting their bail, and we should be supporting their legal cases as they get prosecuted and taken to the edge because they resisted. They protected their community.
Well, Trump is losing these cases. I mean, this is the other thing that the media doesn't cover as much, is that whenever these cases are tried in court, including protesters, being not just disappeared, but anybody who stands in the way of someone being abducted by ICE, invariably in these cases, if they get to court, then the Trump regime is losing. I wanted to mention the historian Rashid Khalidi, who is one of the modern Arab studies professor at Columbia University. He announced on Friday that he's cancelled his plans to teach this fall in response to the school's agreement with the Trump administration. Taking a stand like this, and we've seen this from, a lot of federal government workers who are just like, okay, I'm out, I'm not prepared to pledge my allegiance to the Führer, so I'm going to take early retirement and all that stuff. But we don't get as many of these kind of protest quits as we would like. I think it happens more in the UK and in Europe. That there's a point at which principle takes over, and you're like, okay, I am making an example of this moment. But it's very slow to happen in the US, and I guess it's because there's no social safety net. I mean, people need their jobs, and that their healthcare is tied to their jobs, and so you lose your job because you are making a political point and taking a stand. And your family has no health care. I mean, that's the knife edge as to how Americans live.
But so while I totally understand that. I think every American who, especially a lot of immigrants who come to the US to live and become citizens and everything, realize, wait, I don't have an NHS. I don't have a free public healthcare thing. It does make you make choices differently. I do think we are in extreme times. Yeah. Again, I think some of this started I grew up in the UK where we had a very famous foreign secretary called Robin Cook who resigned over the Iraq war. And he didn't just resign because he believed Blair and Bush were taking us to an illegal war. Half his leadership at the Foreign Office, these were people who gave up their whole pensions and careers because what we were doing was illegal. And I think for me, when people didn't, and this can make some people uncomfortable, when people did not leave Secretary Blinken, you realize they're not going to leave Donald Trump either. Right? When Secretary Blinken, who knew about starvation very early, had a report, which has been covered, right? Where he said, in March of 2024, starvation is taking flight. We are guilty. We're part of this. And the, indiscriminate weapons that we're sending and blah, 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 all that. When we're doing that and no one resigns and they're willingly knowing we're doing this, and that is being accused at this point of being genocide, will they resign over Trump's policies? You have to ask your question is like, if the ultimate crime is not resign, if people are not resigning over that, are they going to resign over this stuff? And what I would say is, yes, it's the healthcare, it's the other things, but it's also careerism. I think people think a president will come and a president will go, and I don't think people should be that certain about that, by the way.
That's right. I think you're right. That's not where it's at now, is it?
And I think that's the frightening thing. If you're not taking a stand, the genocide, if you're now not taking a stand with the genocide plus all this other stuff, you are nothing but a careerist. This isn't your healthcare. This is the future of your country, which will affect you and your children, which will permanently affect you and your children. And the fact that people are not willing to walk out en masse says a lot about the people that work there, who I think at this point are just careerists.
Yes, there's talk of that people should withhold their labor and a national strike, and that's the level at which it should go. But knowing America as I do now, I just can't see an appetite for that. You know, the nation is simply too polarized in a way. Listen, we have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about Trump and Mark Carney and Trump's, you know, again, threatening Canada, partly because it has announced that they plan to join other countries in recognizing a Palestinian state. And Trump's not happy about that, and so is using tariffs as a kind of weaponizing tariffs to get back at the Canadians. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. When you start a podcast, it seems like you have to figure it out all by yourself. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It can be super overwhelming, and every day seems to introduce a new decision that needs an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can start to begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. And for millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/weekend. Go to shopify.com/weekend. Shopify.com/weekend. We're back on The Weekend Show with Ashish Prashar. I'm Anthony Davis. France and the UK are among the latest countries preparing to formally recognize a state of Palestine, a move by two permanent members of the UN Security Council that would deepen their split with Israel and the United States over the 22-month war in Gaza. Canada this week also joined the chorus of nations that have recently signaled openness to recognizing Palestinian statehood. I think, haven't they set September as the kind of cut-off point where, you know, if there's no ceasefire by September, then they will recognize a Palestinian state. There's not much left of Gaza, though, is there, Ash? I mean, in terms of recognizing it as a state, anybody who's seen the images of the terrain and what is left of people's homes and businesses, it's completely destroyed.
I mean,
does that change this in any way?
No, look, recognition is welcome, but I mean, I think 180 odd countries recognize a Palestinian state already. It's fine that Europe have just caught up and Canada, maybe America one day, who knows? I think recognition is the least that these countries can do at this point. You know, the reality is that they're trying to fodder this off to make their public happy. At this point, I think reality is, I will say this, the Lemkin Institute, Jewish Lemkin Institute that was set up after the Holocaust by a Holocaust survivor, called this a genocide in Palestine in December 2023. And it was because genocide is defined by the intent, the types of accelerated killing, the environment it's creating where there's no sustainable life post whatever they're doing. And they've ruled it that. Every international body has called it that, except the State Department and the Foreign Office in the UK. And I also say this as someone who's worked in these institutions. The State Department and the Foreign Office have genocide scholars, and you have to ask yourself why none of them will come forward and put their name on a report to say it's not a genocide. Anyone with their credible bone in their body won't do that. It says a lot about where the world is and where a handful of nations are at this point. Yes, Gaza is gone. Gaza is gone. But should there be a Palestinian state? Yes. I personally, like a lot of people, believe the rest of the world believe it should be one state for everybody. That's my belief. I'm not going to tell everyone what to do, right? It was this a long time ago where Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived side by side peacefully before the Brits were there and before a bunch of international powers carved it up into two. The reality is that, what's going to end up happening on the ground is, a response right now to what the world is seeing. Look, we've watched Arab bodies since 9/11 being dismembered, blown apart, and killed, right? And I think that is why a lot of people in the West who want to believe something else, because I think the majority actually have known this has been an atrocity for a long time. And actually the global majority knew it was an atrocity pretty early on. But people, let's say in the US and Europe, who want to claim that it's not all the things that we all now know it is, or also psychologically have been used to Arab bodies being killed. What they're not used to is forced starvation. Policy. Starvation as a policy. And I tell you what...
Is this why Trump has changed his mind a little bit on sending aid? Because he was shown images of children who were badly malnourished.
Yeah.
And something triggered in him.
Yeah, but it's also triggered a lot of people. And the reason it's triggered a lot of people, my theory on this is like a bit more radical. And a lot of people understand it's like we're used to certain types of violence, which is horrible that we have got used to that type of violence. Yeah. And we devalue people so much. But what we're not used to seeing is things that were projected us during Live Aid. Starvation, is that not something we figured out in the 80s and 90s with these big concerts that we raised money for and stopped Ethiopian and babies starving or babies in other parts of the world starving? And this is starvation as policy? What's wrong with us? Why are we supporting this? People are writing about that into their media outlets. People are writing about that into everything. It has crossed the threshold that is uncontrollable for anyone at this point. And that's why you're seeing all these governments rush to do something. And the minimum they can do is recognize a Palestinian state. But the reality is what they should be doing is curtailing weapons and until the Israeli occupation stops and let in mass aid. We are going to watch an extinction level event on a civilization that is Palestinian. And that is because the damage is already being done. People who understand this, doctors who I've worked with in the diplomatic world, have when you're at level 5 starvation and famine, there are certain drugs you have to use to get people back. It's not just giving them food. The aid is not going to be the solution.
Well, it requires expertise as well. And this is what, Trump was saying the other day, they've got fences up around the food. And that's the problem. They've got to take the fences down.
No.
And again, to have no understanding, because this particular subject requires extreme expertise. You've got to stop people from jumping the food. There can be a stampede. You can lose people who are fighting to get food. So you have to protect the food supply. But also Trump's argument now is that Hamas are preventing the aid from getting to the Palestinians.
Well, the thing is that the whole thing has been debunked even before he made the statement. I think you probably saw the New York Times even eventually go, we have no evidence to show Hamas has been doing that. And New York Times is inherently biased to Israeli occupation, but even they are at this point where they're it's not Hamas. It is the Israeli occupation that is basically stopping all aid from getting in. It's every international body saying the same thing. Every other government, frankly, the West in Europe is saying that it's the Israeli occupation. I mean, everybody knows what it is. The only people that can stop this is the United States. The only people that can stop the extinction or an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians is the United States. Look, the reality is that the Israeli occupation has failed militarily, and the response to failing militarily is to exterminate everyone. Their military goal was to eliminate Hamas. It's done nothing, no damage. You only have to see why occupation soldiers don't want to go back to Gaza, because every actual ground battle with resistance fighters, they come out losing. It's quite frightening, actually, how inept they've been. Actually, real battles. What's actually happened is F-35s dropping bombs on tents and buildings. And that's where you're seeing all this horrible imagery coming from, right? And that is their solution. The violence in response to battlefield losses is all they have. And that is going to lead to the full ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And recognition as Palestine is really important, but what you need to do is actually end occupation and let Palestine rebuild. And the only people that can actually at least stop the initial thing is the United States. And to say that the United States is powerless, I am sick of listening from everyone from Joe Biden to Antony Blinken to Donald Trump and Rubio say, well, we told them you're the United States of America. Ronald Reagan once said he didn't know how much power he had until he picked up the phone and told the Israelis he would stop weapons when they invaded Beirut because he thought there would be a genocide in Beirut. These are his words. His words. He picked up the phone, told then Prime Minister Begin to basically call it a day and go back to Israel. And they did within 30 seconds. A phone call. And
the United States doesn't have that power anymore, does it,
with the Israelis, because we give them everything. An Israeli general through this war on Gaza, this genocide on Gaza, said the rate we were bombing and killing people, we would run out of weapons in a month. And the only reason we don't is the United States sends us new weapons every couple of weeks. And
so let's talk about the leadership here, because we're seeing in the US that if you take a kind of a criminal and give them the White House, that they only really engage with criminals. They surround themselves with criminals. They create a kind of criminal enterprise in place of a government. And we've seen a similar thing in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu, who himself is under investigation, not just from, for various crimes in Israel, but the International Criminal Court have identified him as somebody who needs to be investigated, which is why he has refused to accept their jurisdiction, as Donald Trump has done too, who also is, they're seeking him for investigation as well. I mean, these people are cut from a very similar cloth, aren't they? And Trump refers to Bibi as his friend and kind of lights up when they're together in the room and they congratulate each other on their successes. Is this the problem? The issue is not really it's not the people of Israel, but it's the leadership of Israel, in the same way that it's not the American people, but it's the leadership of America that brings so much corruption and hate to their role.
I think they can both be true at the same time. I think the reality is that, yes, Donald Trump is a criminal. Yes, Bibi Netanyahu is a criminal, wanted by the top court in the world for war crimes, could not be more of a criminal at that point, right? The issue with the Israeli and US comparison is you only have to look at Haaretz. They support it. It's different. I don't think our public supports it. I mean, the fact that people on the left and the right can weirdly agree on this at this point, that we should not be sending any more weapons. You only have to look at everything from, recent votes in Congress to actually stop weapons, and even shows on Tucker Carlson saying no more weapons. This is getting, even if they believed it at one point that it might have been just, everybody's lost. But the Israelis believe in it. It's very different. The reality is, Haaretz did a poll, have been doing polls every month through this genocide, and basically it has always been 80% and above of Israelis support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. That is frightening, and we should be frightened. That is not that is not an ally that we shouldn't keep in check, by the way. We should say, get your house in order. Why? What is this? How can we support this? Why are my tax dollars going to this? Why are Americans killing children abroad with their money? Why is my money funding this? You want to go to war with them? We're not doing it on my dime. You're not going to do it with American bombs. You're not going to exterminate a whole bunch of people with American weaponry. Now, that is a choice that we make as a government that allies with them. That's what I think our government is responsible. I don't think the American people are responsible. I think most of the American people are disgusted by what they're seeing. I think they can't believe that Congress hasn't acted, even with Biden, and now even more so with Trump, with the starvation being so visible to everyone. But the reality is that the culpability on the American side is never holding war criminals to account. This isn't like a today problem. We've never demanded our presidents be held accountable for acts abroad, or even at home, with the Trump example, that have crossed the line, that have been.
They didn't even hold anyone accountable for the subprime mortgage crash.
So we've created that lack of accountability culture. That's what we are guilty of as Americans. But in Israel, they are guilty of wanting this ethnic cleansing. They 80% support it. 62% support it with the extermination. I mean, these are frightening numbers. And I would love people to actually pick up an Israeli publication. This is not my words, not your words, not an American words. This is Israel's biggest newspaper, and they do this polling. They put it out. It is frightening. Now, we should not back an ally, no matter how good that ally is. I would say the same for Britain or France or Germany. If any of them were doing this, we should cut off everything, cut off all aid, cut off all weapons till they get their house in order.
So let's talk about why, though, because a lot of this goes back quite deep into the Bible Belt, as I see it. Obviously the US and the UK were responsible for the creation of the State of Israel in the first place, 1947, right? So that's very much part of the history timeline. And I guess that there is a sense of responsibility to support the nation that you helped create. So that's the first thing. But putting that to one side, there is this belief from MAGA Republicans and certainly the kind of Christian nationalists that Israel is this holy land that ultimately, if they die in America, that they might be reborn there and they'll get to meet Jesus or something. That this runs very deep. And so as I see it, that's why so many Republicans have this kind of fixation on Israel. It's not about the Jews, the Jewish people or Israelis, but it's actually about themselves. And they're wanting to be this nation of Israel that they will be reborn in come the time.
Yeah.
Do you think there's some truth to that?
It's interesting. I think there is a Bible Belt obsession with it. I think the American thing has just been fed to us for a long time, that they are our ally and we need to do everything to defend them, that it's the only place for Jewish people that's safe. I mean, I remember Chuck Schumer saying earlier in this that we need to protect Israel because it's the only place in the world where Jewish people are safe. And I was like, well, isn't that your job in America? Shouldn't they be safe here? Shouldn't they be safe in Britain as well? I'm without negating the fact that Israel should exist or not. Like, wait, as a politician, as a Jewish person, I would be like frightened that you think I can only be safe in Israel, not in the United States of America. We never turn those comments on the back of those politicians that say these random fed lines that have been going on for 50, 60, 70 years. Oh, if it doesn't exist, there'd be no place for them to be safe. By the way, they weren't safe in Europe because of like white Christian nationalists, like who were in the Nazi party. They weren't safe in these countries in Europe and in the US for those reasons. Palestinians didn't do that to them. Palestinians didn't do the Holocaust. And then in turn, we steal Palestinian land and give it to another people. So obviously there's going to be inherent, not just give it to them, we leave it to them with arms to commit their own first genocide, which is called a Nakba in 1948, where they expelled hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Like, so we reward people who suffered a genocide by letting some of the people who weren't even in Europe for that commit another genocide on some other people and think, okay, our job's done. That is what we did. That is what we as Europe and America have done. And we have supported that nation that was built on the genocides ever since. Now, does that mean that we should be backing them eternally because we did this one thing? I mean, look at our ally history. Let's just put America in context for a second, and even the UK. We supported apartheid in South Africa before it was too wrong. I want people to remember that. Our governments, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and prime ministers and presidents before them, supported apartheid South Africa. The public turned that, not politicians. The public changed the narrative. We supported General Pinochet in his coup on another famous 9/11, where he took a democratically elected Chile and exterminated people, rounded them up in soccer stadiums, and exterminated generations of families. We support a lot of bad guys. We illegally invaded Iraq. We'll never undo this, based on fabricated lies. So our governments have never been the good guys. We don't back the good guys, always. I think it's the only thing I've ever agreed with Donald Trump. I don't agree with him on anything else. But I remember him doing an interview with Fox before a Super Bowl in his first presidency, where he said, we've not always been the good guys. As a former diplomat from my country, we have not always been the good guys. We've done bad stuff. And we continue.
Well, it goes back a long way.
It goes back a long way.
As far as slavery.
So when people say we're backing the good guys in this war, wait, we shouldn't really believe our government that we are backing the good guys. Like, we are backing a settler colony that is trying to exterminate the indigenous people of its population. There is multiple examples where we've done that over our history, going back to slavery, colonization. We backed settlers. We thought, Zimbabwe is another example for Brits watching. Like, they're literally, like, we didn't trust the black government at the end because we said they were committing a white genocide. That sounds very familiar to Trump's rhetoric around South Africa today. The same language. Like, we take land and say other people belong on it and exterminate the domestic population. But this isn't a uniquely today problem. To your point, it goes back to colonization. But in this time, we all have seen it with our own eyes. I think in previous times, I go back to why I believe, in a weird way, this is on us worse than the Holocaust. Not to say the Holocaust is not one of the worst atrocities ever. The Holocaust, the Nazis hid from the West for many years. And anyone who's a historian knows this to be true. They lied and lied and lied that it was happening. Because remember, it didn't happen during the war. It started in the 30s, before the war. They started with Jews and Gypsies. Everybody who knows history knows that. They lied.
All minorities, really.
All minorities.
Yeah.
And they accelerated it during the war. So the atrocities got worse. We've been projected this Holocaust in real time by Israeli soldiers. They have TikToked, Instagrammed, killing children. They have celebrated blowing up buildings with people in it. What makes it worse is we know the crime is happening in real time and we are doing nothing about it. And that's what makes it worse. Our governments can't lie about it because, all of us everyone watching knows that they get intelligence. So they see everything. We have the best spy planes and intelligence in the world. So Biden and now Trump have both knew what was happening in real time.
Well, Israel has a Iron Dome defense system and Palestinians don't.
Well, I mean, yes. The whole thing is a mismatch of biblical proportions of people wanting
right. But when does the humanity kick in? Because, sure, everybody will have their politics. There will always be people who are misinformed. There will be people who just close their eyes to it and just will, support their political party no matter what. But the humanity that should really override politics is the fact that women, men, and children have been killed in huge numbers, and that we are now, some news networks that get access in very high stakes, of course, because we're hearing about journalists and photographers being killed all the time. Are beaming back these images of these atrocities. At what point does the humanity kick in and people go, okay, whatever your politics, these people need to be fed and given shelter?
It's kicking in. It took too long, but it's kicking in. I mean, I don't know you. I have a kid. I see my son in every child I've looked at an image of being killed. I do work, as you know, I do work on Palestine, as you know. I've done cases to hold corporations and politicians accountable. Some of the most amazing work I've done is just evacuate children from Gaza. And I see my child. I think everybody looking now sees their child. And I think people in America are fully aware of one other thing. I think that's coming home is what they're seeing with the Alcatraz thing being built in Florida and detention camps along borders. And we tolerate it. Our children are next.
Yes.
I don't think this is ending with Gaza and Palestine. People in power over the world want to know what they can get away with and where they can deploy that. It doesn't mean it's always going to be deployed abroad. It will be deployed with dissent. It could be another Black Lives Matter in 2 years. Well, maybe with this president, now that he knew the last one he couldn't control, maybe he gets really harsh and sticks people in detention camps. Guantanamo now is being used as an immigration detention camp. These aren't things that are like exaggerated examples now.
It's actually happening, but
in real time, use things we do abroad and bringing them home to the American public. To answer the question of humanity kicking in, I really want people to realize that we have failed as a collective humanity. It doesn't mean we can't stop the even more happening just because you're seeing this and thinking it's too late. It's not too late. It's not too late to save a child. Literally right now, we should demand our government, with this dictator in chief in charge, opens that damn border, because he's the one person that can make Netanyahu do this. He's the one person that can make that corrupt Israeli government stop pull out and let aid in, even for a limited time or 60 days, whatever it needs to be. Get the experts in on the ground, because everybody's seeing this for what it is at this point. And everyone one day, there's a book already out that's saying one day everyone would have been against this. We should be against it right now, not one day when we look back in 20 years going, oh, I was against it, but I didn't say anything, blah, blah, blah. Why wait? This is something that is collectively creating a scar on our humanity that none of us should be over. And I want to say another thing. It is shocking to me that Marjorie Taylor Greene is speaking about this.
Yes.
But also, I want to say we need to start looking at people as human beings. Everyone does not like her for good reason. She's a white supremacist. But do you know who she's been talking to? Do you know why she cares about this? Even through her twisted lens? She's been talking to the minister of the Bethlehem church where Christ was born, Munter Isaac. He has confirmed this.
Yeah. Well, this goes back to my point about the Christian nationalists and their
even the Christian. I don't want to about like he's been talking about the lives that are taken, the children at loss.
Yes,
she made her statement based on that, not because of other bullshit. Let's just be clear. That, right. And if that's what it took to her to connect, we should all be connecting, because she shouldn't be the bar. We should be the bar, not the dangerous America first, gun-toting white supremacist. She connected with a priest who put them in contact. A black preacher in Georgia put them in contact. Why are we not getting all our elected preachers, officials from Democrat to Republican to start talking to Munter Isaac? Why are there only two people, the Pope and Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yeah. Well, Trump has sent his envoy Steve Witkoff to Gaza on Friday, I think, and he's been shown one of the controversial food distribution sites around which hundreds of Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces. The problem with taking kind of career diplomats out of the equation and putting people like Steve Witkoff in is, and this goes really as a kind of continuation, in my view, of the closure of USAID that was doing all of this kind of soft power work around the world, because it was feeding information back to the State Department, and there was, there's a back channels, and there was a lot of infrastructure there that enabled countries to make decisions, and certainly for the US to kind of make a decision on international policy. So much of that has gone now. We really don't have the expertise, we don't have the staff, we don't have the people on the ground now. And this again goes back to the America First and the isolationist view of the world. But do you think people like Steve Witkoff in this moment are going to come good?
No. I think the only reason he'll come good is because Trump's brand is being affected by his side of the aisle. I think that's the only force. They could cut this. I go back to one thing. All Witkoff has to say is we're cutting off aid. And the whole thing ends. That's his bargaining chip. The whole thing ends. Biden knew that. Trump knows that. Witkoff, let's just be clear, is an extension of Trump's corruption. They did this flamboyant Middle East tour, as everybody knows, where Qatar, UAE have committed trillions of dollars to American investment over decades, or whatever it is. Well, Mr. Witkoff also made a lot of private deals on that tour to benefit himself, which I'm sure his boss was not unhappy with. Him and Trump grew up in the property game in New York. Witkoff's son was out there doing deals. American diplomacy is now who will pay you, how much, what do you want with those checks? It's also an indictment, baby, on those Gulf leaders who could have also asked for aid to go into Gaza in return for those trillions of dollars, but chose not to. So that's a whole other conversation. They're responsible for this as well, because if Trump really wanted those numbers and those deals, as you've rightly said, they could have added a little nugget in there and said they want this to happen. So they've abandoned Palestinians too. It's not just, America, it's Gulf leaders specifically. But Witkoff, has been stringing the Palestinian resistance along for a long time. He's not a master negotiator by any stretch of the imagination, but also is it a continuation of US policy? I mean, the reality is that, I go back to why, for a long time, this was a slow ethnic cleansing of Palestinian land for the Israeli occupation. It's been accelerated since October 7th. And, again, Biden, Blinken, with a much more authoritative leadership team and a diplomacy team could have ended it with a phone call and chose not to. Trump's just continuing that policy at a more, I think, with the starvation, even a more crueler way, because there's no denial it's happening, right? So Witkoff's not there to get a deal. Witkoff is there to make Trump look good. And I think he's there at this point to get rid of the immediate problem, which is this is in the headlines all the time.
Optics.
And we need to do something. Bibi, will you stop doing this for 90 days so we can save some children, right? King of Jordan did this. When he met with Trump in the White House, he agreed to take, 50 children? The minute the King of Jordan was out of the White House, he took the 50 children, gave them healthcare. 2 months later, he sent them back to Gaza. Why would you send them back to an extermination zone? Because the optics were gone.
Yeah. Well, we shouldn't forget also what Trump has said previously about turning the Gaza Strip into a kind of Riviera, where he can develop property and sending all of the Palestinians to Jordan or to Egypt to effectively cleanse that zone. He said this stuff out loud.
He says it out loud, though, but I would say with Palestine, maybe not all foreign policy. It's not. I would say the mask is off with how we treat Palestinians. That's what it is. Because the reality is that American foreign policy has always been Israel first on this issue, and it has it's always been about the slow ethnic cleansing. I remember a famous Vice interview with Yahya Sinwar, who did it with that amazing journalist Hind Hassan, who went on to work for Al Jazeera, and she interviewed him in 2021 after the Great March of Return. And I remember him saying in the interview where he basically said, we've tried everything. We did Oslo. We did other peace agreements. We disarmed certain resistance groups. And we did the Great March of Return, where we peacefully, with our hands up, walked to the border of Gaza and asked to be let back into our ancestral land, right? And in response, the Israelis killed and maimed thousands of people who peacefully walked there. Almost replicating Martin Luther King over the bridge, right? The Selma idea, which they replicated because they were inspired by the Black Liberation Movement. And what else was going to happen? I remember the famous quote, "You want us to die quietly like we never existed." Can I ask anyone watching, would you let that happen to your own people? Would you die quietly into the night like you never thought existed?
Does this go back to racism, though? Because so much of what comes out of the White House does, that Trump sees Israelis as white and sees Palestinians as brown. In the same way as in the US, the ICE are rounding up people of color. So the racial profiling is being done by these federal officers. They're jumping people, abducting people, kidnapping and disappearing people because of the color of their skin. And Make America Great Again is really Make America White Again. And that extends to the whole world, because we heard even the Vice President J.D. Vance go to the Munich Security Conference and say, you need to be more respectful of these far-right nationalist, white supremacist political parties, which was the most shocking thing for European leaders to hear. And yet that is really the policy of the US under Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's racism. I think the Palestinian question is very unique. I think it's an American policy to... Look, I worked for the Middle East Envoy's office. It's not even an American policy. The UN is so corrupt on this issue that they don't treat Palestinian and Israeli concerns the same way. It's the politest way to put it. Like, they effectively take the Israeli occupation's line on most things. So this is a uniquely Western treatment of the Palestinians who've been so dehumanized over decades. And have been abandoned by our governments. We were never fair actors in these conversations from Oslo on. I think, yes, this White House has accelerated that. I would say, though, what they are doing is they've removed diplomacy permanently. And they are literally using military might and economic might to get what we want. It's not, I actually believe previous American administrations might have been more diplomatic, whatever their color of political party. But I think in this case, Trump administration is like, we're going to use military and economic sanctions to get the resources we want from the world and extract what we want for America. And I wouldn't even say for America, for us. right? Because this is the other thing that's going on. It's like, you know, as you remember, the tariffs, a lot of people got a lot of rich people that he knows in his circle made a lot of money off the announcements that were unannounced, that were announced and unannounced again. So they were tipped off to what was happening. It's not even these resources and this extraction is for America. It's for a certain class in the United States. Let's be fair. I think he's given up on all diplomacy, but the US hasn't been a fair actor in a lot of this stuff for a long time. Trump's just ripped every idea of that away, where we might have believed certain presidents and in the past would at least act in some good faith. Trump didn't.
Well, there would be a framework, wouldn't there? A diplomatic framework with which you work within. But Trump never understood that stuff. So in his mind, it never existed. And by firing half the people at the State Department and just, you know, sending in a property developer to go do your, you know, international diplomacy, what do we expect? We have to finish in a sec, but I have a final question for you, because on Friday it was announced that Trump had ordered nuclear submarines moved near Russia after highly provocative statements from Moscow, from Medvedev specifically. Trump said he'd ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in regions near Russia in response to threats from the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, who said that Trump should remember Moscow had Soviet-era nuclear strike capabilities. My concern in recent months has been that if, you know, there ends up being a war between Russia and NATO, which is highly possible in the coming years, that I'm not entirely sure which side America would take, because Donald Trump is trying to pivot the US away from European allies and to really kind of get into bed with the Kremlin where possible.
Yeah.
This though is a bit of a curveball, though, this announcement, isn't it?
Well, it's all for TV. Like, we can always move subs and aircraft carriers around, right? We did this with the Iran thing. It's for TV, right? Like, we have bombers that can hit you on a paperclip on the street, and we missed the Iran nuclear sites if we really wanted to bomb them. I think that was an agreement with Iran to make America look tough, and Iran would respond to an empty base, right?
Right.
This again,
and this is the former president of Russia saying this.
Yeah.
This is what I find so interesting. He's not even in the current administration.
It's all for show. I think Trump is frustrated. I do believe he's a little bit frustrated. I do think he was hoping Putin would come to a deal earlier, where everything, I think Putin's agreeing to whatever they're actually going to do. I think Putin's extracting revenge right now, honestly. I think he's punishing Ukrainians for any loss of face he has suffered over the last few months. And I think that is frustrating Trump. I think the military might Trump is projecting is a little bit bullshit. Honestly, I can't really go. There's no other polite way of saying it. I think he's just pretending to show the world that he's flexing his muscles, but he will never intend to pull it on Russia. The thing is that their agreement with Russia has been done since Trump took office, right? Russia will continue, and this is where it kind of mirrors what's going on in the West Bank, for example. Russia has been given all this Ukrainian land. It will never be able to take it formally as Russia. It will be Ukrainian occupied. It will be Russian occupied land in Ukraine, governed by Russia, but it will still be Ukrainian, right? So taking their land. Business deals have been made off the back of this. And some of this, to be fair, started under the previous administration, but certain hedge funds and big organizations are making mining deals and regional deals with Ukraine to extract resources right now. Now, what held back the original deal, from what my understanding in diplomatic circles were, is those companies wanted access to Russian occupied land in Ukraine. And Putin originally didn't want to do that. Now he's let that happen. So everything in the deal that could be done, which is horrible for Ukraine, by the way, they've been carved up by two world powers effectively, which is disgusting that we're letting this happen. But that's all been agreed. Businesses will have access. A certain class will make a lot of money. Ukraine's being carved up. What I think where there is a bit of frustration from the White House and why he's play acting is, I think he was hoping for that to be a quick win in his diplomatic deal-making circles. But Putin doesn't care. Putin doesn't care. He's like, I don't give a damn if you need a quick win for your base or for America. Yeah.
You're referring to the I can end the war in 24 hours.
Yeah. And I think weirdly they have a deal struck up for a few months. I just don't think Putin has any desire to sign it right now. He knows the president can't force him to sign it. And he is definitely hell-bent on extracting a bit of revenge for some of the face he lost. And he knows with America, even giving a few more weapons to Ukraine Ukraine is no position to continue this. I can tell you firsthand, European stockpiles of weaponry are low. They're not going to continue this funnel to Ukraine. They've expended so much resource and capital supporting this, and they've got nowhere. Russia is in the driving seat at this point, and is actually taking a tiny bit more land every day. We're just not getting it in the news anymore because it's not newsworthy like it was when.
Well, Trump's new angle is that we'll give weapons to Europe and they can give them to Ukraine, and we're effectively selling them, and therefore we're making a profit. So that's how he kind of 100%. Presented that to his base.
I would say to anyone watching, like, the whole Trump moving nuclear submarine stuff is for show. It's the same as the B-2 bombers that Iran knew were coming. It's like, I don't think he actually wants to. I think the scary thing is with him is like, would he start a war for his PR image over something like Epstein? Maybe that. But over this, I think weirdly, this is for show. And he's hoping Putin at some point will decide that he's had enough of Ukraine and will sign a deal. I don't think it's in his hands. It's not in his control. But the sad truth for Ukrainians is the deal between these two superpowers has been done. A lot of businesses are going to get a lot richer, and they're going to extract from a country that is, I think, sadly been used through all of this by everybody, in fact.
Interesting. Okay. We have to finish, but I'm very grateful to you for your expertise and your thoughts. Ashish Prashar, thanks for joining the Weekend Show.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News, or by joining the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. And I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.